Dumelang
Sanborani
Moeni Hui amore Lociani
Avusheni
Macelloni
Good morning
Dumelang Sanborani
Sanborani
Moeni Hui amore Lociani
Lociani
Avusheni
Avusheni
Macelloni
Macelloni Good morning
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Michael Viega. I'm an assistant professor of music at the John J. Cali School of Music at Montclair State University. And welcome to my basement. I really wish we could be there together in person, but thank you very much for the conference committee's tremendous efforts, monumental even, to bring us here together in this forum today. I am happy and honored to warmly welcome you to the World Congress of Music Therapy Spotlight Session on Innovations in Music Therapy Practice. I would like to introduce you to our spotlight speakers, and I will help moderate a question and answer after the presentations. Please utilize the Q&A form to direct your questions and also to vote for the ones you feel like you would like the spotlight speakers to address. I will not be checking the chat form as much, so please post in the Q&A. And now I'd like to introduce you to the spotlight speakers. Dr. Andrew Knight is an associate professor of music at Colorado State University. He has research interests in substance use disorders in adults and early childhood social-emotional developmental issues. Dr. Knight has been published in the Journal of Music Therapy and Music Therapy Perspectives. Along with Drs. Blythe Lagosse and Alicia Clare, he is co-editor of the textbook, Music Therapy, An Introduction to the Profession, published by the American Music Therapy Association. Dr. Knight's presentation is titled Technology in Music Therapy, Innovations in Clinical Practice. He focuses on technology as one of the areas of innovation in music therapy practice and discusses previous and current research on the topic and looks at what's known, what's unknown, what is the critical need to understanding technology better, and what we should do to address those needs as a profession. Dr. Viggo Kruger finished his PhD in 2012. The theme of his dissertation is related to music therapy in the context of Norwegian child welfare. He holds a position as associate professor at Gamut, University of Bergen. Since 2002, Dr. Kruger has facilitated music workshops for children and adolescents living under the care of Norwegian child welfare system. Dr. Kruger's presentation is titled Music Therapy and Child Welfare, Bridging Provision, Protection, and Participation. He will elaborate on the relationship between the children's rights and international child welfare and music therapy theory. Annette Whitehead-Plough is president and CEO of the Center of Cultural Responsiveness, a nonprofit that provides education, training, and supervision in diversity, inclusion, and equity to colleges, universities, and practitioners. In addition, Annette teaches at the Berklee College of Music, Loyola University in New Orleans, St. Mary's of the Wood College, Colorado State University, and Leslie University. Annette is co-editor of Cultural Intersections in Music Therapy, Music, Health, and the Person. Annette is a frequent presenter and trainer at conferences across the globe. The presentation today is titled The Interplay of Technology and Cultural Responsiveness in Music Therapy. Annette will explore the interplay between electronic music technologies and cultural responsiveness in music therapy clinical practice. Dr. Joanne Lowy is the director of the Department of Music Therapy and associate professor at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and is founding member of the International Association for Music and Medicine. Dr. Lowy is the editor-in-chief of the international peer-reviewed journal Music and Medicine, and serves on several editorial boards, and is Cochrane NICU and Palliative Care reviewer. Dr. Lowy's presentation is titled Music Therapy Practice in Pulmonary and Sleep Function, From Illness to Wellness, in COVID and Beyond. In this spotlight session, critical domains of vitality will be presented. Highlights will reflect how specific components of music addresses the physiological and traumatic incidents that disease symptoms and pandemics can evoke. Enjoy the spotlight speaker presentations, and I will see you for Q&A afterwards.
Hello, my name is Andrew Knight. I teach at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado in the United States, and I'm pleased to be here to talk about technology and music therapy today. It's not lost on me that I might have one of the more ironic presentations at this conference, given that we're on this particular medium and that you're watching this presentation through a variety of means, and who knows where you're watching it or what time you might be watching it. In 2018, when I was first asked to do this session, the world looked very different. Our profession looked different too. And visualizing this conference, thinking about what I'd want to discuss today, that also looked different. So here we are discussing technology while using technology that many of us hadn't used before 2020 began. We're using technology more and differently in providing our services to clients in the last 3 months. I don't have any new data for you on that. But given that we are discussing innovating our practices in this 2-hour session, I have 2 introductory thoughts. First, music therapists across the world are ahead of me in innovating lately. I'm mainly an educator who was, just like a lot of us, who were scrambling to get my courses online and figuring out new opportunities for practicum students that I supervise so that they could gain their needed hours and experiences. And second, I hope that some of the overarching ideas that I planned on presenting before the pandemic hit are still valid. I hope they're still useful as we're all navigating the remainder of the pandemic and considering how we might retain some of these innovations for the future, particularly in this area of technology. I had a dissertation advisor who always made me frame these questions whenever we were writing a paper, reading papers, critiquing other people's research. So I think one of the ways that I chose to frame this was kind of looking back on how he tried to form my thinking around this. And I do this with my students as well, and I think it's a useful device, particularly in the short few minutes that we have to discuss such a broad topic. And that's asking, what is known? What do we actually know about what we're about to discuss here? And then the opposite, what is unknown? What's the critical need based on the things that we don't know? And then what should we do about it? Usually that last question is like a student comes to me and they want to do a thesis, and we say, what's the critical need? What am I going to do about it? And so I'll say this more in the collective, in the what should we do about it? What are things that we can do if you agree with me on the first 3, what is known, what's unknown, and what those critical needs are. And maybe you can come up with some more knowns and unknowns and critical needs as well. Let's start with what is known. In terms of technology, a great deal is known to us. This quote warns us that it's not what we don't know. It's not our ignorance about certain topics. It's thinking that we have it just by the means to obtain it. How do we know that this is the case? Because many of us have searched for chords to a song on the internet, and we found out they were wrong. We've plugged a 1/4-inch cord into a speaker at the start of a group, but figured out the keyboard still isn't working. All this is still ways of thinking that we know something and that we don't. So it's not about ignorance. It's not the lack of knowledge. And I'll come back to the illusion of knowledge part at the end, but it's not the lack of knowledge. Technology, especially with the internet, we can have the feeling that we know quite a bit about things generally. In the States, Robert Kraut, especially in the paper that you see on the left side of the screen, started writing about technology in music therapy in 1987 in one of our journals, Music Therapy Perspectives, and I've got the front page of that. You can see it's called The Microcomputing Music Therapist, a primer that Kraut did back then, where he was really just talking about here's what a computer is and here's what a floppy disk is and how it might work. He later also had a series of articles that was called under the heading Integrating Technology. It was before the time when the internet was widely available. It was just in its infancy and really didn't come online or on board around here until about the mid-1990s or so. And he was exploring this business of microcomputing and MIDI technology, digital interfaces for musical instruments, how to modify instruments for clients to play. Why do clinicians need to create new sounds? Why might they want to? So he was asking what is known, and Kraut showed us this. And then later down the line, Dr. Tony Meadows, when he was editor-in-chief of Music Therapy Perspectives, he asked me to write a series of articles to update some of what we, quote, know in the field. So the article on the right is the first one that I co-authored with my colleague here at Colorado State University, Dr. Blythe Lagasse. And we wrote that at a time we weren't working together quite yet. I was still at the University of North Dakota. That's what you can see in the header there. But we put this article out that says Reconnecting to Music Technology, looking back and looking forward, that acknowledged that Kraut had been already looking at what technology meant at that time in particular. We addressed some of the knowns at the time with a nod to that previous work, and we listed some of the emerging bits of technology that could be changing the game for clinicians at the time. Subsequent articles in this series focus more on the products like iPad applications, USB microphones, and less of the tech theory behind it. So we were trying to get at, Kraut is saying this is what we know in the late 80s and early 90s, and we were trying to say this is what we know now, just in the 2010s or so, and also looking back on it. So we were trying to give a well-rounded ideal of what is known. So going back to the quote here from this author and educator, Daniel Boorstin, that was published in the Washington Post in '84. In this case, the illusion of knowledge in technology is that we have surrounded ourselves with technology that has grown exponentially to be orders of magnitude more powerful than we would have guessed by 3 or 4 year increments, according to most tech researchers. So just think about when your mobile phone starts acting funny or when warranties on speakers or guitar pickups run out, that 3 to 4 year window of obsolescence that is kind of built into certain technologies as well. And yet, surrounding ourselves with this technology has not always translated into knowledge about technology. It's the illusion of knowledge about technology. That's not to say that we haven't looked at and had really good writing about this in particular. There have been several articles over the years on, in some way, looking at technology, and people have defined technology different. And there's a couple of large categories that I thought I would just bring up with this. And so I'm just putting out on this slide, what is the landscape of music therapy technology then? And the picture on the right is what's the landscape look like? Can we see what the entirety of the picture is necessarily? And this is a picture of our oval on our campus at Colorado State University. And one of the first areas, even though it's less recent as some of the other ones below it is a really excellent survey that was done by my colleague Nicole Hanna and her colleagues. It was published in Arts and Psychotherapy in 2012, and it included 4 different countries. You can see the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada. So from those 4 different regions of the world, they got a really good idea of how technology was being used. And you might assume what some of the outputs of that, or the outcomes, or the things that they found in that survey were. Generally, older people were using technology less than younger were using it, and that most people felt that they had to use technology as clinicians. However, they didn't feel prepared for it. They didn't feel like their education helped them learn what their use of technology might look like in a clinical setting. Here's a couple other ideas. Mode of delivery. So we're increasingly getting more into this telehealth space, telemusic therapy, lots of different terms that people have been using over the years. These aren't exhaustive lists or anything. These just happen to be, like I said, newer articles that I'm using as examples. So Spooner et al., also in Arts and Psychotherapy, where they did case studies looking at how they did telehealth music therapy session, or music therapy, dance movement therapy, for veterans in particular, people with past military service. And actually there was just a recent thesis by Glover that was published last month out of Molloy College in the state of New York. There's been some theory looked at, not very much, but Wendy McGee really has been, I think, one of our most important leaders and writers in terms of thoughtfulness around theory. So she published a nice paper that was in the Nordic Journal, where she also mentioned this idea of the subject-object interaction. I'll come back to that in a few slides. There's the idea of peripherals. So Ward studied this. This is 2019 Music Therapy Perspectives. Peripherals meaning what's the stuff around the laptop or the desktop environment? What are the stuff that you can plug in and use? Digital computing and software. So our moderator for this session, Dr. Viega, had a really nice paper in this in 2018 in Music Therapy Perspectives, particularly accentuating how hip hop, because that is such a digital medium as opposed to like folk or singer-songwriter music, particularly to hip hop. And then he also integrated a humanistic approach that incorporated uses of digital technology. And then this other paper by Crook and McFerrin, 2019, again in Music Therapy Perspectives, also talking about the specifics of the software they were using. And then instruments. So Abby Dvorak and Borsaw in Music Therapy Perspectives. This is, and that came out of University of Kansas here in the States again. That was about the AUMI. That is the adaptive use musical instrument. So something that's a little bit more broadly looking at what instruments actually could mean, what we refer to as instruments. And Partisati, it came out of the Nordic Journal, and that is that's a paper out of 2018 from Brazil, also talking about the use of digital instruments and seeing instruments as technology. So these are the knowns. This is just a little snippet of what the literature has been looking like, and the publication record's been really good on it. It just has to turn over a lot faster, which brings us to our unknowns. So I've got 3 different categories here. The training of future music therapists, answering the call that Hannah put out in that survey paper. The second one, how clinicians are using or choosing not to use technology. What are the barriers or threats? And then third, the client experience. And I'll come back to that a little bit later as well. What do I mean by unknowns, though? Well, in terms of what we usually mean in scholarly research, it's that we don't have a great deal of causal research in these areas. The wonderful writings of Kraut that I mentioned, which have continued on to his 2015 text, Evaluating Electronic Music Technology Resources for Music Therapy, and Wendy McGee, who I mentioned, who also has a 2013 book called Music Technology in Therapeutic and Health Settings. Those were starting points that I pointed people to when I would present on panels or work on technology with my students. But these are also past that 3 to 4 year mark that I mentioned, when tech theory and innovation tends to turn over. So in terms of this research, it can feel a little bit like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. As soon as you publish a paper or book on tech, it starts to need an update. But unlike the tech on our screens, there's no push notification requiring you to download the new operating system or the new information and incorporate into your second or third edition or update your article. Even in terms of the client experience, their perceptions and any self-report used in clinical settings may be ethically problematic. If we survey them, if we survey clients, for example, if we have them use a brief questionnaire after music therapy sessions or do some qualitative interviewing to try to learn their impressions of the use of tech in their sessions or treatment regimen, might they see that as disingenuous? Shouldn't the main research questions be about the client's overall well-being, their progress through their issues, and their needs? What does it matter whether we use an iPad app or an electronic hand drum? Do you consider using groups to compare, like 2 classrooms of elementary age students on the autism spectrum, one that only uses acoustic instruments for facilitating sessions, and the other classroom uses apps and speakers and music composition software, and on and on? I'm sure many of you can see the potentially confounding variables in pursuing research around this particular issue. This quote sets up our third area, the critical need. It says, yes, there is the use of technology as the tool, the instruments, the internet, the iPad, but how do we address the 3 unknowns from the previous slide here? Rather than focusing on technology as the tool in therapy, the therapist may be better placed to attend to being, quote, the good, close other with a dialogical mindset. So here's 3 unknowns, and here's 3 critical needs. So let's address each of these. First, how do we teach the dialogical mindset? Students are the digital natives, so to speak, but we can't assume that they know the best ways to use the technology tools at their foundational level. We have to balance the theory of use with the app, the program, the system that we introduce to them. But educators will likely do well with this. I'm optimistic that as digital native generations move into academia, they may have less apprehension about diving into technology to learn for themselves. And many likely use technology clinically before entering into academia. Hopefully, the days of the professor with the self-deprecating comments at the head of the classroom, struggling to make a video play or start up a recording program, and proclaiming, I'm such a Luddite with this stuff, or saying, I am so not a techie person. So hopefully those things will go away. Not because there still won't be people who have a natural predilection against the use of technology. People who have had negative experiences with technology, people who have diverse personalities, some that don't lend themselves to approaching technology the way others of us do. But we do need those phrases to go away so that we can model openness and humility using technology for our students. Second, clinicians who can match the thoughtfulness of theory with the utility of instruments. As I said when I was interviewed for promoting these different spotlight sessions, my general view on technology is actually to probably use it less than you think you should. And third, we need to engage in evidence-based practice, the 3-part method for approaching clinical decision-making in music therapy. The 3 parts of evidence-based practice are using the best available research, understanding our own clinical expertise, what is inside and outside of that, and then understanding client preferences and how they play into our clinical decision-making. Evidence-based practice and the use of technology means that the client is still at the center of our process, not the newest update to GarageBand or digital instrument interfaces or iPad apps and other peripherals like that. So that brings us to the final point. What should we do about it? We did what's known, what is unknown, what is the critical need, and then on top of that critical need, the idea that technology is so rapidly evolving, it accentuates those 3 critical needs in the previous slide. So what should we do about it? Well, one way to look at this is to consider ourselves taking a dialectical approach as a profession. So what is our both and way of looking at this? How do we support educators who are teaching students and support clinicians who already have years of clinical expertise? How do we simultaneously learn the nuts and bolts of basic technology use and make sure they understand the theory behind the use and teach that simultaneously, whether that's in the educational system or whether that is through workshops, continuing education sessions? And how do we lean on published research that sometimes loses its utility? And at the same time, how do we create bold and future-reaching research programs? And I'll add here also, while hopefully we're maintaining the ethics around it that I mentioned in some of the previous slides. So think about that picture that I put up before. Do we really understand the landscape in terms of what is known? That picture that I put of our oval here on campus. Can we see the forest through the trees? Are we able to see that the trees are just the little bits of technology and the forest is the whole system? It's the system of therapy. It's the approach. It's your models. It's your, at the core of it, are you still maintaining the forest of the therapeutic relationship with each of your clients, patients, etc.? So another way to think about that is to say, if everything is technology, is nothing technology? Isn't everything that is, even things that are, we could consider acoustic? An acoustic guitar that has more technology with the guitar nuts, or with special kinds of strings, or ways to have hand drums that are more easily cleaned, or able to have a better sound from a synthetic head on them. All those are still forms of technology. And these are some of the things that I wrote about in 2012, 2013, where it again comes back to how are you defining technology here? Because technology is this very large, amorphous thing. So is everything technology? And if it is, isn't nothing technology then, if we're surrounded by it, if it's ubiquitous? And to finish, this is a broad topic in music therapy right now, but it always has been. Kraut wrote about how music instruments were becoming more digitized and more portable decades ago. And the exponential growth of technology means our learning curves are warped. My advice is to try to adopt a mindful approach about technology. There is no need for you to feel that you need to learn everything about every new app, every new instrument, or every interface. I'll paraphrase the writer Michael Pollan, who says about food science and food writing that he does. He says, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. So try out these 9 words to sum up a takeaway from this presentation. Use technology, not too much, and use it to connect with people. So thanks for checking out this presentation. I hope it stirred some interesting thoughts, comments, and questions for you. And past our Q&A portion of this particular session, if you have any other thoughts about this topic, I'd be interested in continuing the dialogue with you. My email address is right here, andrew.knight@colostate.edu. And then I can also be reached if you just search up Colorado State University Music Therapy. Thanks very much for your attention.
Eller gå upp en början, en ny värld komma fram. Jag kunde ringa dig igår, idag är det ingen som förstår. Så är livet, det är vanskligt för mig att få både vara sån. Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Viggo Kruger, and I have 25 years of experience as a music therapy in various child welfare settings. Today I work as an associate professor at the University of Bergen, where I can use my background as inspiration for both teaching and for researching. The song I was, which I dared to sing for you, is a song written by a young person who have participated in a music group called Come Closer. I will come back to that group later. But since the song was in Norwegian, I want to translate some of it to you so you can understand what it was about. One door is open, one is closed. A whole new world appears. I could call you yesterday. Today, no one understands. This is the way life is. Things are difficult for me. Why does it have to be this way? This song reminds us of which meaning music have for young people. As we know from many music therapy books and studies, music can be a way to convey important messages of life, such as feelings, states of minds, and as in this case, the sharing of complex emotions. Why does it have to be like this? In my speech, I want to, by the use of practical examples and reflections, share ideas and ways of thinking about music therapy in child welfare settings. The speech are inspired by the book I recently have been publishing on Barcelona. And thank you, Karen Brucia, for giving me the possibility to publish my first book in English. It was not very easy to write it in English, but I managed in the end. And hopefully someone will read it. One purpose of this spotlight speech is to contribute to an increased awareness among adults who work with children. And especially in relation to what is called the UN Convention on the Rights of the Children, from now on shortened to UNCRC. In my view, we can regard the UNCRC as a document both informing and guiding our practice. The UNCRC can be used to improve the quality of our practice. It can be used to educate children and adolescents, and it can be used to help children and adolescents take responsibility and help others. As such, by the use of UNCRC, children can be regarded both as rights holders and rights bearers. As we know from music therapy research, music therapy studies show that music is used by young people to communicate things that otherwise is impossible to talk about in words alone. Music provides a sense of belonging, but also a safe space for privacy. As such, music can be regarded a resource to both connect and disconnect from others. And this knowledge is important in child welfare work as children and adolescents are placed in near proximity of adults. Having the possibility to disconnect can therefore be of great significance. Some songs remind us of the good parts of life, while others bring back painful memories. Let's look at a fresh example. During Corona, many of us have used music to gather extra energy and comfort. According to numbers provided by Spotify, statistics show that the situation we are in has put its mark on people's choice of music. During Corona, people have been choosing more acoustic and less danceable songs than they usually do. And in addition, personal playlists are more linked to cooking and housework than under normal circumstances. People are also sharing personal playlists more than before. In England, the song "You Never Walk Alone" with Gary and the Pacemakers from 1963 has an increase of almost 150% if you look to streaming. Songs like "Don't Stand So Close to Me" by The Police and "Everybody Hurts" by R.E.M. has had an increase. Interestingly enough, these songs is about loneliness, isolation, things that we can associate with Corona. Why is this information important in our context? A recent study done by American researchers show that 52% of young persons living under care of the child welfare system have reported that Corona has given them negative impact on their mental health. 31% has lost access to academic or post-secondary educational supports, while 21% did not have access to personal support to ensure that their educational goals were disrupted. In other words, music may, for the young people, have been a resource in the managing of their own life situation. Back to my own experiences now. My professional life as a music therapist contains the story of Come Closer. A story that started in 2003 when I was employed in a child welfare organization. In 2003, the willingness to explore music therapy was very present. And one of the reasons was that the adults working there was very frustrated because they had to argue a lot with the young people. There was a lot of unsatisfied and angry meetings, and there were a need for a solution to this. On the other hand, many of the adults working there had a great interest in music, a factor that really helped in the establishing phase. The adult social workers back in 2003 contributed with playing, singing, and of course they were audiences when the young people gave concerts. Music became part of the agenda at interdisciplinary staff meeting, and music was discussed as a way to create a better dialogue with the children. Music was in fact seen as a vehicle in the realization of the UNCRC values. In order to grasp the meaning of the UNCRC, let's look at the following scenario. A teenager is playing guitar in a rock band. He has a guitar, an amp, and gear needed for playing. He has skills in music production software, and he knows how to handle beat-making pads. He has been attending guitar lessons since the children's school and therefore knows some basic skills such as chords, riffs, and scales. In sum, this teenager is provided with the necessary material and immaterial resources needed to participate in a popular activity amongst young persons today, namely music. And as we know from research, participation in cultural activities such as music gives protection against unhealthy factors such as isolation, marginalization, and deprivations, factors that is very present during these Corona times. The role of being a guitarist offers possibilities for standing out as someone cool, to be someone important, and to get recognition from peers and from adults. The image of the teenager illustrates what the UNCRC may imply. In order to make good enough music therapy practices, we need to see various components of health and care work as reciprocal dependent, and not just to look at one component at a time. Our young musician could be an example of how a child-focused orientation might look like. A child-focused UNCRC-oriented system is recognizing children and young people as individuals with rights, including their right to participate in major decisions about them in line with their age and maturity. Central to a child-focused orientation is best interest of the child, Article 3. Article 3, implemented as guiding law in most countries, globally speaking, may be regarded an umbrella article, giving direction to all the other articles in the Convention. A child-focused orientation embracing the best interest of the child will try to incorporate the 3 P's: provision, protection, and participation. The provision articles are about creating and guaranteeing access to certain goods and services in order to ensure children's healthy development, not only physically, but also emotionally, spiritually, and culturally. Protection articles are connected to protection aims to shield children from consequences of harmful decisions of others. The protection articles include protection from all forms of child abuse, neglect, exploitation, and cruelty, including the right to special protection in times of war, and even now, as we all go through the corona situation. Participation articles include the right to express views and feelings, the right to search, receive, and pass on information, the right to determine and practice their beliefs, and the right to create and participate in associations and peaceful assembly. These rights ensure freedom to have a say in matters affecting social, economic, religious, cultural, and political life. Even though the participatory rights are specified in the Convention and in most countries' laws, research shows that implementing the participation rights is problematic, as illustrated by the following quote given by a young person participating in music therapy. When I first came into the child welfare institution, I lost my independence. The adults told me I was not old enough to think for myself or to make decisions concerning my own life situation. It was a very bad feeling, losing control over my own life. I think it's the worst I have ever experienced. I will never experience that again. As this quote illustrates, children are clearly a major source of information about what is happening to them and what they wish could happen. As this participant documents, the underlying image adults often have of children can act as a barrier to participation. When a child is seen as vulnerable and in need of protection, the child's opportunities to participate decreases. For children with child welfare experiences, music might be a resource in the process of replacing a stigmatizing identity with another more useful one. To not remain in potential negative roles, such as a child welfare user, requires support in identity construction work and, in particular, help to find alternative identities to choose from. Music therapy can be such an alternative and create arenas where children are supported in the way they create such alternative identities. We have research showing that. In conclusion, there is not a single way of growing up which is valid. There are multiple trajectories leading towards adulthood. As music therapists working in child welfare practices, we should embrace the multiplicity of childhoods without losing sight of what has been labeled the best interest of the child. In order to reach the best interest of the child, we need to have both and perspectives. By taking both and perspectives, perspectives, we can recognize different kinds of childhoods and identities as valid in themselves, and at the same time be able to demand young people as regards the rules and norms of society. It is about taking into account that the child needs to be taken care of through participation in the community, and at the same time recognize that the same child might need support and guidance on its own way to adulthood. In sum, music therapy may be a way to create a platform for developing practices in child welfare settings that are in line with the values from the UNCRC, that is values operating in the intersecting areas of provision, protection, and participation. Thank you.
Hey there, my name is Annette Whitehead-Plow, and I'm a music therapist from the United States of America. I'm just going to move myself up there. And I am here to talk to you today about the interplay of technology and cultural responsiveness in music therapy. I first want to say thank you to the folks at the World Federation of Music Therapy for inviting me to speak to you today through this spotlight session. And I'm coming to you from Massachusetts in the United States of America. So this is what we're going to do today in our short time together. I'm going to do an introduction of who I am. Then we're going to look briefly at a cultural responsive music therapy practice. And then we're going to look at briefly about music therapy and technology and how it's changed over the last 20 years. And then we're going to look at the interplay of technology and cultural responsiveness. So who I am, I'm first and foremost a clinician for 27 plus years. I've worked in you can see a variety of settings, in psychiatric schools, in community settings, in intimate partner violence, in hospice. But the bulk of my career, 15 years, was spent working at a pediatric burn hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, where I worked with children and their families who had suffered burn injuries. And it was a site of a lot of medical migration. And so people came from all over the world to receive medical care at the hospital. It was one of the premier hospitals in the world. And it was at Shriners was a foundation. Those experiences there were foundational in my research career, which you can see next is that I've spent a bulk of my career working in research. My initial research was looking at the impact of music therapy on pain and anxiety, especially during medical procedures. I also looked at trauma and music therapy in medical settings. While I was there, technology really just changed, and my interns and I started exploring all the different options of technology, of computers and tablets and iTouches and music-based video games and electronic instruments and digital instruments and just all the different things we can do with that. And it was really, really quite exciting and so much fun. And it really changed music therapy for me. And then finally, I started looking at cultural responsiveness in music therapy and also queer studies in music therapy. That also grew out of my work at the hospital, of working with these children from all over the world. And I would often have a caseload where I didn't even share a language with my clients, and I was always working outside of my first language of English, and with people from all different cultures, and I really had to learn a great deal about cultural responsiveness to function there. I'm also an academic. I teach at several colleges in the United States, And then I've been an advocate for music therapy for many years. I've served in music therapy organizations my entire career in the United States. So we're going to look at culturally responsive music therapy practice really quickly. And so there's three different parts of that. First, it's the examination of yourself. There's exposure to other cultures, and then evaluating your practice. To break it down a little bit, examining yourself is a couple of different things. And first, you have to look at what are your intersectional identities, like what makes you up. Like for me, I'm a white person. I was assigned female at birth and was socialized as a female most of my life. I identify as transmasculine, non-binary. I also identify as queer. I am mostly able-bodied, have dyslexia, so I have a neurodiversity, but the impact of that upon my function is very minimal. I'm credentialed. I'm highly educated. In the United States, I speak English, and so I have lots of power and privilege there. And so all these different identities, you come with different levels of power and privilege or oppression. And it's not a one or the other. It's not a binary. I don't do binaries. It's a continuum. And so, being white, and I'm at the very top of privilege with being white in the United States. But my dyslexia is not so bad that I'm impaired. I'm a published author, so clearly I can work around it. But I do read things and experience the world differently than other people, and so it's somewhere in that continuum. But then, my gender identity as a transmasculine person puts me in a place with a lot of oppression in the United States. And so it's good we need to know like our identities and where we have power and privilege and where we are oppressed. But then we also need to understand that we have biases because of all these different identities we have, or the cultures that are associated with those identities. We grow up with lenses on, cultural lenses through which we see the world. And it's super important for us to be able to see that we have these lenses on first, and then learn to take them off and enter into the space with our clients as much as we can. We can never fully understand our clients' experiences, but we can attempt to at least witness and to be there without our cultural lenses, without our biases. So that's the first step of it. The second step is exposure to cultures and like learning about the cultures of the clients that you're working with. And then finally, is evaluating your practice and looking at things like your assessment process and looking at an intake, looking at how you set goals for your clients and what the goals are, and treatment planning in general, and how do you implement music therapy and what tools do you use within that, like what types of music and what types of instruments, and how are you approaching sessions, and shared power, is that a part of it, like all those sorts of things, and how you evaluate the music and the other, the words and the affect and everything of your client, how that is also impacted by culturally responsive practices. Cultural humility is a big part of this, and that has 7 different steps. And the first is being open to learning and to differences. And that means that we can't see all humans as the same, that we're actually all very different because of the different cultures we're in, and because of our experiences are all different. And so we have to be open to those differences. We also have to be interested in learning, truly learning who our clients are. And so this is different than learning about their diagnosis or learning about what brought them to therapy, but also learning, who is this person, and what are the many different forces in their life that create their cultural lenses and how they interpret the world. We have to have a willingness to enter into our client's worldview and set aside our biases. We also have to know how impossible it is to be adequately knowledgeable about all the cultures we're going to encounter. And sometimes even our own cultures, we may not be that knowledgeable. And that's a hard one for music therapists, because we're taught that we're supposed to be in control of the sessions, right? We're supposed to know everything and be, this is the client and this is the therapist, and we're going to tell them what to do and work with them. And, And we're told that it's not okay to say, I don't know, but it's actually absolutely vital for us to be able to say that. And that's the next step of saying, I don't know. I remember clearly the very first time I had to say, I don't know to a parent. I was saying, I don't know about your culture. I don't know what exactly to do with your child musically, but I do know about how to use music. And if you can help me understand your culture and the music, then I can absolutely modify what I do to make it relevant to your child. And so when you start saying, I don't know in your sessions to your clients or the parents, you have to understand that the power dynamics are going to feel very unbalanced, that the client has more power, and they do. But it's super important to realize that the client will never have the same amount of power as you, because we have the chart with very personal information, and they don't have that about us. And we have to be comfortable in uncomfortable places within ourselves. That's very important. And so I talked about this briefly, that we're aware of our culture and the culture of our clients and the majority culture of the community, so we can understand the pressures that may be on the client if they
culture of the
don't
community,
subscribe
so
to
we can
those
understand the
majority
pressures that
cultures.
may be on the
And then we modify our different parts of our work. So technology in music therapy, it has changed so much in my lifetime, because of technology has been the biggest change. And I think that maybe the changes in technology may be the biggest change in music therapy for most of for like the 70 years that it's been here in the United States. It really has been a significant change. And so there's many different technologies that we use in music therapy. So electronic music instruments. I like to use music-based video games, MP3 or MP3 players. Oh my gosh, when I started, like, we had a record player on a cart, and then I would go, and we had like these big bookcases filled with LPs, and I'd have to pull out, records, and then go into the session room and plug in the cart and put the record on. And now, like, I can have a tiny little device, like teeny tiny little thing, and that will contain more music. Teeny tiny little thing, and that will contain more music than all those records and all those shelves.
Hi, welcome to a spotlight session. I'm Dr. Joanne Lowy from the Louis Armstrong Center in New York City, Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital. Today, we will focus on unique practice in music therapy and medicine, pulmonary function, sleep, from illness to wellness, COVID, and beyond.
Hey there, my name is Annette Whitehead-Blow, and I'm a music therapist. Embrace the cultures of our clients. Also, music-based video games are super cool, and you can enter into like the adolescent cultures with our clients through those games, and do parallel play or interactive play with them, and to work on the goals that they have, whether it could be like physical goals or emotional goals or cognitive goals or communication goals or social goals. You can do pretty much anything with the video game. And because of like YouTube and other internets, just the internet itself, we have access to nearly every piece of music or song recorded. And that's so handy when you're working with people from different cultures. You can pull anything up, and you don't have to go out and buy it or learn it. You can pull it up and play it through your Bluetooth speaker, and boom, you're experiencing the music that has meaning to them in the moment. Again, we can create genres of music or sounds that are culturally relevant, like through apps that that have a reggaeton sound. I couldn't create that on my guitar, but I can create it with an app. And also with some of those apps, you can compose music that sound, and you can use I'm using my Snowball microphone today. With that and my Mac, I can lay down tracks with my client, put in a drummer, and they can sing, and we can then create a song that sounds, and I can mix it on the Mac and then create like a CD or MP3 file for them that then it sounds like what they hear on the radio, which is so different than when I started. Like we would record on cassettes, which was a totally different experience. And now we can provide music therapy to clients no matter where we're located or they're located. We can meet to them over telehealth, and that's huge. And so we're able to serve some underserved communities or people in places where we're not. And that's expanding the cultural responsiveness. The higher quality sounds and recordings, again, is messed up, low tie. Like, it doesn't matter what my true socioeconomic status is. It is how my client is perceiving me. And when I walk in with all that, I look like money, like I have money, and that I am affluent. And that can either, if you're also working with an affluent person, then there can be a feeling of like that we're the same and we come closer together. But if our client is from a lower socioeconomic status, then it's a feeling of difference, and it can be a barrier between us and our clients. And we can also be looking at things through our cultural lenses of our socioeconomic status with our clients. And that's, so socioeconomic status is not something we talk about a whole lot in music therapy yet. And so when Dr. Shirley Tan and I were planning out our book about cultural intersections in music therapy, it was something I considered, and we talked about, both of us considered it and talked about it, but we weren't really sure like who would be the expert to write about it in our book. And so we decided not to do that chapter in the first version, and in a later version I do intend to have that chapter. But yeah, it's something we need to think more about, because if we want to work with people from all socioeconomic statuses, and especially people who are really in need of our services, maybe people who are in lower socioeconomic statuses than us, we need to think about how we appear to them and what kind of biases our clients might have about us. And if we're aware of those, then we can work with them and to work through them to create a stronger therapeutic relationship. If we're not aware of them, then that difference will always be there, and we'll never able to get close to each other as close as we need to be therapist and client. The same goes for class, like in different societies that have different class statuses. Like, again, if I walk in and I have all these instruments and things, it looks like I'm a higher class, and that, or a different caste, or a different, than my clients. And we need to, again, be aware of that. So we're not acknowledging the differences that our clients may see between us, and that may actually exist, and then working with that. In the United States, socioeconomic status and class are as a result of race, and just because of the white supremacist society that we live in. And so you can't talk about socioeconomic status without bringing up race. And so within the United States, the majority of music therapists are white people, and so a white person with a computer and a microphone and an iPad and a guitar and all sorts of instruments and nice clothes and clean, like, again, is money, and again is massive amounts of privilege compared to maybe people who are of a different race than white, or how people of different races are perceived by white people. And we have to be knowledgeable of this and acknowledge it within ourselves, and maybe within the sessions, and have those conversations with our clients. Ability is another thing that can come up. Like, technology actually can enhance people's ability to play. Like I worked with some kids who were just so they were so sick that to pick up like even a little Chiquita maraca was like took too much energy. And so using like a little tablet and putting like a little xylophone app on it and just having them run their finger over it, that was like all that child could do. And it then allowed her to be in music and to experience music and be a part of it in a way that was different than just listening to me. And so like it can enhance ability, which helps us to be together more in music, but it can also show those differences. And then religious barriers are potential too, like in like some religious cultures are cool with technology and others are not cool with technology. And if we're coming in with all our tech, it might say something. And then finally, like the idea of the digital native clients versus many of us who are like me, I'm a digital immigrant. I mean, not import, but immigrant. And so I've had so many kids that I worked with who like were like, oh, I know how to use that app and do it like, and I'd be like, and I would sit there and again, like the power dynamics would shift and they would become the master and I would become the student in a moment. And that was actually okay. It was okay to be in that place and not knowing with my client and letting my client be the master and the one who knows and the one who's showing me, giving them mastery over the moment, giving them opportunities to be fully themselves and to feel like they're a worthwhile contributor. But that's again, stepping into that cultural humility place of being able to be comfortable with those discomforts within ourselves. So that's what I have to share with you today. I really want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to the question and answer session. Yeah, I wish you all well. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to a spotlight session. I'm Dr. Joanne Lowy from the Louis Armstrong Center in New York City, Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital. Today, we will focus on unique practice in music therapy and medicine, pulmonary function, sleep, from illness to wellness, COVID and beyond. It's nice to see Louis Armstrong on the front. Louis is our big boss from above. I also come with orientation from the American Music Therapy Association and the International Association for Music, Medicine, doctors and nurses working in conjunction with music therapists on some of the research I'll present today. Well, here's a picture of myself in the operating room. And when we think about people in hospitals, we have to think about the brain, the neurologic motor, that sometimes because it has fear, our thinking gets convoluted with fear. We have to think that trauma is part of the experience. So all the work that we do at the Louis Armstrong Center includes aspects of trauma, aspects of breathing, sleep, sedation, which is such a big part of music therapy and music psychotherapy and medicine. I'm lucky that I come from a large center. I've built this center over the past 26 years. We have 2 doctors on staff, a nurse practitioner, cancer, air, advances in respiration, oncology, and most recently, Alzheimer's. We have a doctor boarded in integrative medicine. All of us come together each week and we round. It's a large team. You can find out more about us and our trainings. Let's get into today's topics. Also thinking about our interns, research fellows. Takes a village to do research. We have grown from a small 1-unit pediatric service into a international program, and we're based on music psychotherapy. That means that there's a relationship involved and medical parameters. We look at wellness, what makes a person tick, quality of life. We consider traumatization of diagnosis and being hospitalized. And live music and culture are a part of every assessment treatment plan. This is a man on a respirator who basically was shut down, depressed. And when he heard the winds and strings, he looked up and there was communication. There is something to winds and strings that can entrain quite simply with breathing. Today we'll look at that impact in terms of people's capacity to visualize, to imagine, so that their motor, their neurologic thinking can reconnect with their breathing. We also sedate with music. I'll show you a clip of that. Music therapy and sedation from life to death transition, also for medical tests. So our first study, we looked at how could music therapy be effective in sedating babies and children. And we did it with our neurologist, nurse, as all our studies are, looked at length of time to sedate, how long, because parents were upset that their kids would get chloral hydrate, would zonk them out. There's even incidents of death with this sedative. So we were surprised that overwhelmingly the live music therapy, the Song of Kin, was so much more successful and safe in sedating babies and children for medical tests. And this research was published in 2 medical journals, to our surprise. Next, we moved into NICU. In 11 NICUs, we looked at breathing and the impact of entraining with entrained instruments. Where we could stop and start with the baby's breathing and move and keep in rhythm. Then we used very simple heartbeat sounds and trained to cardiac function with the babies. The third intervention, of course, was the parent's voice. This also involves entrainment of breath. We see in neonates the largest diagnostic categories come with a lack of breathing. Between that and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease in adults being the 3rd largest killer. Why is there not more research in music therapy and pulmonary function? So with the neonates, we've made part of our curriculum learning how to enhance breathing, learning how to enhance entrainment and use rhythm, breath, and melody, of course, the culture of the Song of Kin to enhance breath function, and also to bring the babies and parents on board. With adults, many of our programs, especially our advances in respiration, look at how we help people breathe with singing, with wind playing. We have the first study of music therapy, music and medicine, along with our pulmonologist, headed by Bernardo Kanga, Ranina Asule, music therapist, published in Respiratory Medicine. This was their first clinical trial paper utilizing live music. I want to show you a brief clip of what this work looks like. We did this work with groups and advances in breathing. Well, maybe I'll come back to that. It's when playing with adults. They're singing, they're controlling their breathing, they're controlling and thinking about their favorite place or a place that brings them comfort and breathing, which changes their pulmonary function. Let's move to asthma. Asthma's the #1 pediatric emergency room visit in many hospitals. It's responsible for missed school days. And it's exploding in inner cities where the breath control, because of the environment, can get very, very difficult for children. So we used spirometry, and we looked at 200 kids, and we used singing, active wind playing, and music visualization. We gave them wins to take home, journals, children and teens in many of the hotbeds. So the ocean drum really helps us help children understand how to breathe. So merely hearing a wind can help people breathe. And this really helps children understand function of breath. This is in the New York City public schools with groups. Take a look.
This is Eyewitness News, the news leader, with Diana Williams, Sade Berenois, and Lee Goldberg with the exclusive AccuWeather forecast. Now, Eyewitness News at 5.
Finally tonight, using music to help treat children who have asthma.
Thanks to a financial gift from one of the fathers of jazz, music may be helping some young asthma sufferers in the Bronx. We traveled to Melrose Public School to watch 4 young men who suffer from asthma on their way to a special class. This is an outreach program of the Louis Armstrong Center for Music and Medicine at Beth Israel Medical Center. Melrose is one of 3 schools in the city doing research in this area.
Oh, and let it go.
Using woodwind instruments to teach breath control.
So it's the woodwinds. Then it's also helping children actually learn good breath control and connecting their images, their safe place with the breathing. Very important work for us. So for 10 years, we worked on this study in many of the New York City public schools. And it was finally the results of our study, which were compelling, made it into the Journal of Asthma, again, with doctors, with music therapists. So this idea of not just helping control lungs with playing, but actually helping people control their thinking so their breathing can be enhanced. I've developed this story song method where kids and adults can actually imagine where they be, play about it, sing about it. Play. So watch, this little girl came in a stretcher to the emergency room, everyone in panic around her. And very soon, through singing and my whistling, she begins to play and sing about her desire to go home, play video games, and she gains function. She gains capacity of her breathing, which sends her home sooner and saves money.
Sitting down, watching the sun go down. We can play some video games when we get back home. Get back home. Get back home. We're off in the distance, so far away. We keep running until we get there. We won't stop until we go.
Let's play the whistle some more. Can you blow it now? Long breaths. So the fact that she's singing about where she wants to go and then starts breathing to it means she'll fare better. Let's move into sedation, another area that's rich for music therapy that we don't read too much of in the literature of music therapy. Well, with our team of doctors and nurses, we found a lot of older adults have falls, especially in the hospital. Why? Because they can't sleep. Why can't they sleep? The noise, the fear, the different conditions. So we set up this Project Sleep along with Wen Cheng Lit, the music therapist, the doctors, and I created a protocol for sleep, and it included music therapy. Sleep is really such an underrated option for all kinds of pain. Sleep can help the dying feel comfort. Using a song of kin and sleep as sedation can be critical for many other medical outcomes. Sleep comes with neurologic function. People can't sleep, their brain changes. We see it in Alzheimer's. We see it in stroke. We see it in depression. So I actually wrote up the option of music therapy as a potential for sleep improvement. And in the journal, The Nature and Science of Sleep, I outlined the sedation effect, which goes from, it's been tested, familiar song of kin, changing the meter to 3, 4, 6, 8, removing the intellectual words, selecting a vowel according to ailment, repeating the cadence, and then in training on the last note. Let's watch a video of this process. Let's move now into an actual case study of a couple, a well-married couple with a son, David, who's 2 years old, who has asthma. His asthma is affecting his sleep, mostly his anxiety that exacerbates his capacity not to be able to sleep. Let's watch. So I've already worked with Lisa and Bob, and we found a meaningful song of kin that has positive associations from their vacations together with their son David. It's important to use a song of their culture that means something. Let's sedate. I'm so glad you guys have a song that you love. That makes it easier. Let's sing the chorus. Stand by me, stand by me. Ah, nice. Now let's shift the mood a little bit. I'm going to put it in what we call a holding meter, a waltz like 3, 4, 6, 8. Stand by me, Stand by me. Let's repeat that last part. It's called the cadence. Stand by me. Let's keep repeating it for predictability. Stand by me. Couple more times. Stand by me. And now just the me. I thank Lily Klein and Chris Pizzuti on the music therapy team for playing parents. Let's move now. So then we move into COVID. The only exciting thing about COVID for music therapists is that it affects breathing, and therefore we have a way in, especially in the aftermath. New York City had the most deaths in the United States, and we've gotten control of COVID. I knock on wood, but now we're doing music therapy to address breathing and fragility. When COVID hit, we hardly knew what to do. We wanted to go in. We've always been an essential service, but we knew it was dangerous for patients and for staff. So we immediately created sessions from home. Here's our asthma initiative program, which went from the schools, like you saw, into the kids' homes.
The Louis Armstrong Center for Music and Medicine presents music therapy interns Elise Hawks and Emily Wilcox in a video resource for the Asthma Initiative program.
Hello, 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 hello.
So first I'd like you to find something you can shake. I found this. It's a little jar full of sesame seeds. So this is going to be my maraca today. Do you want to happy sticks? Yes, I'm ready for music. Yes, I'm ready for fun. I'm blowing them to different places. So when we blow into them to send them out into the world, we will take a deep breath in and go like this.
So you see, these children with asthma didn't miss their music therapy because our interns were so creative. Now, one of the things we saw were staff vulnerabilities during COVID. So we did two things. We created Louis Zoom rooms so that staff could go, of course, in their gear to their computers or their phones and hear and be comforted, the music therapy team playing. And then we put some of them live on the internet so they'd have access at any time, any place.
And today I would like to offer you a few moments of stillness. So I would first like to invite you to find a comfortable position.
Having visualizations with double stops on the violin drawn by Marie Stumpf really gave patients and also staff options in their own time to be able to use access of music therapists creating these music visualizations. Now we're in the aftermath of COVID, and we see a lot of our staff who were allocated to different places on site, and also staff with COVID coming back to work, nurses, doctors. They have lots of feelings about this crisis. So what we've done is our team has created something called PATHS. It's an acronym for this 4-step program: pause, align, treat, heal. And we're giving our teams mechanisms to be able to function at their best, going back to work with music therapy. We've done several books too on trauma, cancer. This is a book all about the breath and health that are available through our center. There's also the Music and Medicine Journal. The outgoing president of IM, Patravut Vansanasap, has created an instrument for breathing. Imagine that, one of the doctors doing that. And there's great articles on environmental music therapy, different places where singing can help, instrument play can help breathing. This is information if you'd like to do any of our 2-day trainings on site at Masana Beth Israel. Thank you so much. Please like us on Facebook, Twitter, stay in touch. We hope to help you grow sedation and pulmonary programs. Thanks.
As we wait for our spotlight speakers to emerge, just a couple of notes. Just a reminder that the closing ceremony will be held on Zoom. And in the top of the chat, there's a sticky note that says how to get the link, how to link to the Zoom for that closing ceremony. So please make sure you copy and paste that link now, perhaps in your browser, just so that you can, so that you don't lose it once the session is closed. So copy and paste the Zoom closing ceremony note now, please. Also, thank you for being patient with us as we navigate the technical difficulties, especially in a spotlight session that talks about tech. That's how it always works. And so I want to just give a big shout out to the World Congress team that are making things happen in the background, helping things run smoothly and getting it back on track. So a big round of virtual applause for the World Congress team. You all are the true superstars of all of this. So welcome back, Vigo and Joanne. We'll wait for Andrew and Annette to join us. Hello, Andrew. And he's gone. But we can vamp like all musicians do. I guess while we're waiting for Annette and Andrew, Vigo and Joanne, is there anything you'd like to just open up with and share as you watch the presentations?
Yeah, it's
breath and depth.
A little technical delay there.
Really great to see the breadth and depth of this work.
Yes.
And Dr. Viega, you're a great moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the vast world you've created. It's just inspiring and amazing in New York. And thank you for all your years and dedication of work and research and community building that has happened around the globe.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dr. Knight. Welcome,
Hello.
Andrew. And we'll wait. Vigo, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just some thoughts about the presentation. It's nice to hear all of the good work and that we are a kind of a family with similar thoughts and inspiring each other and learning from each other. I was lucky enough to visit Joanne at her work a couple of years ago, and that was very inspiring. So hope to come back, Joanne, someday.
We loved having you. We still have thanks to Scandinavia summer scholarship, which allows people from the Nordic countries to come and learn for 2 weeks, expense paid. So I hope we can expand that in the future.
It's too bad these days we can't go anywhere. So we have to wait.
That's true. We have to innovate in new ways in this space. And I was wondering if we could maybe address that as we enter into things. Maybe talk about as within this topic of innovating in music therapy. What have you seen in your various practices where music therapists, educators, clinicians, researchers, what have you noticed in terms of adjustments they've had to make and innovate in order to adjust into our new COVID environment?
I will say that breathing is such a part of COVID. So our studies in pulmonary function are really important. But socially in New York City, Annette's work and Vigo's work are so important. I feel like the rights, the human rights, and the means of connection are key.
Yes, thank you. Andrew, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd go on with what Dr. Lowy was saying. I think one of the things that I've been learning as I'm going through this process of I'm trying to do some different ways through our American Music Therapy Association, then also with a group of music therapy educators that we call our faculty forum. I'm trying to do work this summer and find as many people who are able to help with education specific resources, figuring out ways that we can, work around this kind of telehealth and what we would usually consider a less than ideal situation. But I think we're putting so much on ourselves because we're so used to the person to person in the room connection that we're able to create. And one of the things that I think we're learning when we have to live so disconnected is how little we actually need to use music in a good way. Like a little music really goes a long way in establishing connection to people who, aren't having the weekly sessions they were having before. And we don't have to put too much more pressure on ourselves. We can really start realizing how much power there is in the music, and maybe it can help us reconnect to that.
Vigo, how about you in Norway? What have you seen there?
Well, we have, I guess we have more or less the same situation all over the world. And we had a lockdown in March, April, and May. And we had to start making new ways of working right away. And but I think that, yes, there are solutions, but I don't think that we should underestimate the difficulties COVID-19 will produce for people in the future. I think there will be huge problems with health problems, depression, isolation, and so on and so on. In Norway, we had an increase of lack of labor that rised from 2 or 3% till over 10%. And that kind of problems in the labor market will, in the long term, produce a lot of problems for us in the society. And maybe music therapy can be a way of addressing the problems in the long term, but I think that we really have to look very closely on how music therapy can be as part of the solution. And we are not there yet. We have to think about this a lot and create new kind of practices and new ways of working, really, to address the problems that will come to us in the society. So
Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
big problem.
Annette, we were welcome. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. We were talking about innovation in the time of COVID and just expanding a little bit about that conversation. What you have seen in the past few months, both indications and contraindications of working and adjusting in this time period. Is there anything you want to add to that?
My work right now is mainly in academia, and then like supervision and private consultations, and so that hasn't been too impacted, except for everything's moved to online. And so, yeah, but it kind of opens up things that there's more I can do for, from my home.
I want to move on to now that everybody's together, to a point, a question that came in very early on. One of the innovations of being online at a conference is that the presenters can actually interact and share our thoughts while the presentations are happening. And so we were really responding to a lot of the questions and talking while they were happening. And one thing that came up for us we're noticing words and language such as digital native, digital immigrants. And we got into a discussion about how the language of technology and even the language of this spotlight session, such as using words like pioneering work, take a very colonial stance, and how music technology often has very engendered binaries such as male and female plugins when we're discussing. I was wondering if any of you would like to share what your thought process, what came up for you during these presentations related to those topics, especially taking a critical peek into all of this.
What's your question specifically?
I was wondering if anything came up for you all during the course of this presentation that you would like to share about something that might have challenged you or expanded your way of thinking during each other's presentations.
I think the thing that keeps coming up through Zoom, online, and generally is that we are in a pandemic socially and physically, and that convergence is something I work with every day. And now it's happening in the world. And I think it really beckons us to put the music with the medicine and the social with the individual.
Yes, thank you. Other folks? Yep.
Yeah, sure, I'll take a jump at this. So yeah, when I was doing a presentation, and yeah, I struggle with the terms of digital native and digital immigrant because of the because that's loaded language around race and class and yeah, and but right now I use it because it's the language that's used in the field of digital stuff. And when we're talking about like in education, like a primary and secondary education, that they talk about like right now the differences in the teachers and the students, and how students have grown up in technology and the teachers are far behind. You know, so that's sort of that's the language that's being used, and it's not the right language, but luckily language is always transitioning and changing. And one thing I thought as I saw when I saw us, and during the presentations, I was noticing that we're all from either Western Europe or the United States, and that there's not to discount the voices that we have here, because we are all like really amazing folks. But there's a lot of other amazing folks from other parts of the country, the world. I mean, who could share information about the way to use technology and other innovative practices.
Yes, thank you, Annette. Vigo or Andrew?
Well,
anything to add?
to this question, that I come from the music industry before I started as a music therapist. And the stories about the groupies, for example, is very discriminating against women. And it seems to me that it is very genre dependent if music is discriminating or not. Some part of the hip hop industry, as we know, is very discriminating, and some part of the heavy metal genre is the same. But yeah, so we have to look closely into the genres and the artists and the lyrics and the way that the music is produced to find discrimination and be observed, be reflective about how we do that. And that comes into play very much when you work with young people, because young people is very easily taking up the language from songs and lyrics. And so in doing that, we should maybe not be too too strict or to hinder the way they use music, but maybe elaborate and find the meaning in the way that they use this music, and in order to get behind what is really going on in the music. Because if we just try to forget that music, then we also forget the expression of the young people. Discriminating music can be very important for the young people. We know that from hip hop music. It's very important for young people to listen to hip hop. But at the same time, it can be very discriminating. So again, from a human rights perspective, it's the balance between protection and participation. Again, we have to find the right balance there.
Thanks, Vigo. Annette?
Annette.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I was, I think that so much of our so much of our all the songs are written from the perspective of people, and people have, again, different biases and different beliefs and stuff, and so it gets embedded into the songs. And if we look at like a lot of popular music, if we look at the role of women in that music, women are very degraded and shown as sexual beings, and it gives messages to women and girls and people assigned female birth, or that this is the only way that you can be, and so it's still important to use that music, but also to help to be thoughtful as music therapists about what is the messages in this, and maybe work and in your sessions and talking and bringing this up as something to consider, because that there's so many messages from our society embedded in all the media, and that it's important to help people to see that there are other ways to be.
Thank you. And I just want to note that we might have some technical difficulties with Joanne's connection, but she is typing within Q&As and answering questions. And so if you have a question, Joanne is responding in that form too. I just want to jump a little bit with regards to time, and I want, and this kind of is an extension of a question that's asked by Minuan Lo, who is asking, what is the future of innovation in music therapy, education, practice, and research? I just want to expand upon that a little bit and say, we talk a lot about the needs of a 21st century music therapist, and yet here we are in 2020. We are firmly in the 21st century. So what do you think about the 22nd century? Let's talk about 22nd century music therapy. Where do you envision it? Where do you envision things going in terms of the long distance? Envisioning it now.
I added something in one of the questions. I think that is that this is what you're posting here, Mike, is that's an important thought experiment to really think to ourselves. I posted it as a response to a question about education, and it made me think about if I need to teach something about clinical percussion skills, or if I need to teach something about assessment, is there a rationale for me using technology? Is there some different way that I should be teaching it now than I would have taught it if it was 1980 or 1950, or to your question, I think if it was the year 2050 or the year 2100 or whatever, do I have to teach it any different? Do I really need technology to do it? Are we saying one way or the other that there's something about an innovation educationally or an innovation clinically that is going to create a better field of music therapy? Or is it more that it's not about the innovations in teaching or the innovations in clinical work, that it's more that, is it, how do I want to say it? Is it more that we're going to have this group of people who are taught more of the fundamentals the same way without innovating the fundamentals, because that's why they are fundamental? That it's really up to people who are in all these different spotlight sessions, and those of us who are able to continue our educations, that our innovations comes out of the clinical work. It comes out of what we do further down in our careers, and that we don't have to put pressure on ourselves to be innovative in every single intro course, or in every single application of technology, or in every single clinical session that we might have with an individual or a group.
I think the 21st century music therapist will need to be flexible and creative, and I think we need to teach folks to lean into that and to look at things beyond what they are. Like if you're looking at technology, look at a video game, not just that you shake a maraca and something happens in the game, but that think about all the things that you're doing, all the motor things that you're doing. And so you could be working on motor goals. You could be working on, like if you're playing Guitar Hero, it's probably not called that anymore, because I'm old. But, like games like that where you have to motor plan and oh, here comes the blue thing and I have to hit the blue button, so you have all that sort of planning going in, and, with hand-eye coordination and, brain information going to your hand and timing. And so you're these things are not just games are actually just as much of a tool as a guitar or a slide whistle or a maraca, and that we can use them in a myriad of different ways. And so teaching ways to think and ways to be creative and ways to be open is fundamental, and that's what we need to be doing more, as well as we work in a medium that is based in culture. Like music is a cultural phenomenon, and we work with people with different cultures, and we're working in emotions, which most emotions are culturally based. There's a few that are like pretty universal to humans, but the rest are very culturally based. And so we're in all this sea of culture, and we don't it's not studied in our, especially in our undergraduate work and barely in graduate work, and that we really need to, I think we need to change music therapy education to embrace the culture that we are working in and the cultures that we're working in, and that's really necessary.
I think we need to be careful, especially in a pandemic, how much we do with technology, especially when it's not yet perfected to enhance entrainment. The timing has still not become accessible. And so I think we need to be careful, especially in the pandemic, how much we shoot away through machines. There is something sacred about live. And I'm not saying tech has not improved the world. It has. Artificial intelligence is today, but we need to be careful for our profession how much we instantly give away through tech.
Thank you, Joanne. Yes, we have just a few minutes. We have about 2 minutes left. Just wanted to, again, make sure that everybody download or copy and paste the Zoom link, which was earlier, and the password. If you scroll up in the chat, make sure you get that. Maybe the World Congress can just put it up one more time, make the Zoom link and the password for the closing ceremony. Within the 2 minutes we have left, would anybody like to share some concluding thoughts? Just a brief summary. Yep.
I just wanted to agree with Joanne, and it's tempting to paraphrase the Australian rock band called Tame Impala. And they say that in the song, I feel like I'm only going backwards. And in music therapy, there is something old, and we must not just reach towards new technologies and new ways of doing things, but also remember what is inherent in the way we do music and make relationships.
Thank you. Andrew?
I think that was a good Tame Impala reference, Vigo. Well said.
It's a great song.
Yes.
Annette, would you like to share any last words? We open it up for the last words, maybe.
I'm just super grateful to be here today and with everybody, and to share the stage with these really amazing folks that I have admired for many years. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. An honor to be here with each of you. And I think with that, Annette, thank you very much. And we'll see everybody in the closing ceremony. Thank you all to the Spotlight presenters. Thank you all. Great job, everybody. Thank you all so much.
Yay.
Yay. Yay. All right.